live, hopefully.
Okay, sorry.
There's usually a delay on my side, so we might be live and I don't know it, but let's see. I think we are good to go. So hello, we're so happy to welcome you to the Escondido Public Library Virtual Author Chat Series, sponsored by the Friends of the Escondido Public Library and in partnership with the Ripped Bodice Bookstore. We're your hosts. I'm Jessica Buck, and over there is Cathy Janovitz. Today we will be speaking to Syed M. Masood. Oh, Cathy, take it away.
Syed Masood. See that? This sounds lyrical.
Hi, everyone.
Before Jessica introduces our fabulous and wonderful author, we want to let you know that during this chat, we will be monitoring the comments. So if you have any questions about what you hear in our chat, or if you have any questions for our author, please feel free to add those to the comments and we will try to get those answered. Woohoo!
Thanks you so much, Cathy. Okay, so our wonderful author grew up in Karachi, Pakistan, and now lives with his wife and children in Sacramento, California, where it's hot, and where he is a practicing attorney. He is a first generation immigrant twice over. He's been a citizen of 3 different countries and lived in 9 cities. He wrote a few couplets in Urdu when he was a teenager, and his family still tells everyone he is an Urdu poet. He is not. More Than Just a Pretty Face, his debut YA novel releases August 4th, which is very soon. And his debut contemporary adult novel, The Bad Muslim Discount, is coming out in November 2020. So exciting. We're so happy that you're here joining us today. And before we get to our questions, just kind of want to know, how are you doing?
I'm good. We're doing Eid celebrations right now, which is the end of the Hajj in Saudi Arabia. So I'm all dressed up and spiffy, and we've been waving at our relatives from driveways. It's been fun. Unusual, but fun.
I love it. We just let people know again that if you have questions, you can ask them. And I guess we can go on to one of our first questions. So we want to know more about your book. Can you tell us a little bit more about it, and what was the inspiration for More Than Just a Pretty Face?
Sure. So it's a YA rom-com. I actually came up with the idea of writing about the colonial enterprise first. So I hadn't thought of it being a YA rom-com. I just had to find a way to package it in a way where I could tell the story, but I'm a comedy writer, really. And so I just happened to write romances because I think every good story has to have one. But the comedy is the main thing. So I started off trying to figure out how do I tell this very heavy, how to address this very heavy theme in a way that will be digestible. And then I started thinking about who should I write it for. And I thought, it would really help for young people to have some perspective as to the fact that the history they're learning in school is not always A, accurate, or B, comprehensive. So I thought it'd make a good YA theme, and then it was always going to be a comedy. It just happened to become a rom-com. So.
Awesome. Cathy, do you want to ask the next question, or do you want me to just go through?
Oh, I can do it. It's fine. I can read. Yeah. So you've been asked this before, but I want to call attention to this because I think it's so important. Your novel is told from the perspective of a Muslim main character. Let's see. Danielle?
Yes.
I did it. Danielle, who we learn right away, was born in San Diego, but whose family is from Pakistan, not India. There's a moment in the first chapter when his history teacher says India and Pakistan are the same historically. How important is it to have Muslim representation in your book?
Well, I think it was Toni Morrison, the great Toni Morrison, who talked about when you start writing, you're writing, and I think the question that she was asked was more about what kind of people are you writing about? And she was just like, I'm writing about my people. And so that was my immediate thing. It's just a natural thing for me. It's my first thought. So I didn't really think much about it. I think having a lot of Muslim stories is great. We have some wonderful YA authors. The Henna Wars came out recently, and Adiba is an excellent author, and SK Ali has her books, and Samira Ahmed has hers. And what's happening as Arvind Ahmadi has his, and so what's happening was really cool is you're getting, I think, towards a representation of Muslims who make up like, I think it's 2 billion people or something. But what you're also getting is very different points of view. So the Muslims in my books are very different from the books from SK Muslims than Samira Ahmed's Muslims, and I think that's fantastic, because I don't think any one author is capable of representing a culture. We just can't do it. I wasn't even trying to do it. I was just telling a story. And so it just later when you start the publishing journey, then people start talking about Muslim representation, and you're like, oh, I guess it is. So I think it's a public sort of a in the publication journey, it becomes a thing. But when I'm writing it, I'm just trying to tell the truth as best as I can, trying to make people laugh and smile as best as I can. That's my job, and the rest of it is gravy, as I say.
I love it. And that moment in the first chapter with the history teacher, I mentioned to you before we went live that the history teacher annoyed me. And part of it was just the first moment when he's like, well, where are you from? And he's like, oh, I was born in San Diego. I was like, no, but like, where are you really from? And we hear about that so much, where people are questions like that. And the fact that he's like, oh, India, Pakistan, they're basically the same thing historically. And I was like, no, that's not, you can't say that. And the whole time throughout reading the rest of the book, I just kept thinking back to that moment, how things just kept coming back to that. The next question basically goes along with that, how the book has that overarching theme of colonialism, the importance of having a voice, and then understanding the responsibility of then using your voice. So you kind of answered this a little bit, but maybe we can kind of go into it more. So when you first started writing or planning, was there a main topic or theme you wanted the book to cover, or did it kind of like grow while you were writing?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to
No, sorry.
It's hard to say. What's hard for me is to admit how disorganized I am.
No, admit it.
Are you a pantser?
Yeah, I am.
You're not a plotter?
I don't plot at all. Like at all. I have a blank page and I start writing, and I start with the understanding that the first 50 pages are going to get thrown out probably. Maybe I can salvage like 5 of those pages, So it's a painful and disorganized and messy process, but what's cool about it is I don't necessarily know where the story is going to go. So if the reader can figure it out, that's great. Because if I didn't know, I assume that you didn't know either. With a rom-com, it's a little more difficult because there's an expectation for the genre as to how it's going to end. And so everyone knows how, but no one knows what the journey is going to be. So that's a surprise. So I knew that I was going to write about Churchill in some way, and I'm going to talk about colonialism. But when I started writing the book, it was very different. And Danielle Jelani, who's the main character, was just a side supporting friend character, but his voice was very strong. And so after I'd written 50 pages, I'm like, yeah, not this character, but the side character that I wrote, he could be something. And so then I had to scrap it and start all over. And the second draft, if you will, but that was pretty good. But the first was terrible. So.
I love it. I just had to delete a question because you just answered it. I was going to ask you if you.
I was trying not to answer in advance.
No, it's fine. No, it's great. I was going to ask if you like get to know your characters before you start writing, and it sounds like you get to know them as you're writing, which I love.
Yeah, I will generally, like, people ask me, how do you create characters? And again, because of how disorganized I am, I feel like I shouldn't be giving anyone writing advice, because it's painful, guys. I mean, not knowing what's going to happen, writing yourself into corners, sort of stumbling your way through it. It's not the best process. I'm kind of envious of people who know what they're doing. But what I will say with character creation, especially the main character, is, you know, give them one great strength and give them one great weakness, preferably more than one. So in Danielle's case, not academically gifted and sort of stigmatized because of that in his own family, but a very good heart and a very good, just a good soul. And so, and what's cool about those two qualities is they seem like opposites of each other. And so, you know, he's endearing in his own way and he has his flaws. So give your characters flaws if you're a writer, it helps.
And I'm curious, when you were in high school, were you like the nerdy kid, or did you fall on like the other side?
My high school years were very, very interesting because we had just moved from Karachi to Toronto. And this is going to come up again. Actually, it wasn't Toronto. It was like a suburb in Toronto called Pickering. And anyway, so, you know, I was more like a Sahara character because I was trying to figure out what my identity was. I was trying to really strongly identify with, you know, you just change countries. It just changes a lot about you. But you know, I was required to be a very good student by my parents. And my first parent-teacher meeting in Canada, in the West, when my father went in to talk to my teacher, it was a biology class, and I was averaging like a 97, and he was very upset. And he was like, "Where is the other 3%? Where'd that go?" And so he went to the teacher, and in the
parent look for it.
Yeah, in the parent-teacher meeting, he's like, "What is wrong with him? You know, how do we fix him, and how do we get him back to 100%?" And the next day, my teacher's like, "What's wrong with your dad?" It's just the way he is. So yeah, I was a nerdy kid for sure. Also, by the way, what's interesting about English as a language is the way we speak it is very different from the way we write it. So I had spent my life watching English TV shows and reading English books, but you miss out on the slang, you know? And so weird things happen, like someone says, "Oh, that's sick," and you're like, is that good or is that bad? You know, that kind of stuff took some time to get used to. So it makes you feel very awkward as a teenager when you don't know the colloquial language. It takes some catching up.
And it's always changing. The slang is always changing. Before you know it, it's not cool anymore.
Right, but also like there's a logic behind these things that, you know, if you don't know the culture, you don't. For example, when I made some friends here in Toronto and we were going somewhere in their car, they'd all shout shotgun, and I'm like, what is this shotgun thing? Like, you know, what is that? And they explained that when the cops would go out, the guy in the front seat would be carrying the shotgun, so that's where that comes from. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And now that I know it, sure, but it's like a weird, yeah. I never got shotgun because I didn't know what to say, at least for the first 6 months or so. Yeah.
That's funny because I remember the first time in junior high, someone said the nose goes, and I had never heard that before.
I never heard that.
So like everyone puts their finger on their nose, and the last person to put their finger on their nose like has to do the thing, and I didn't know. So of course I had to do it, but it's like, it's really funny when you're in those situations where you just don't understand it and have to have it explained to you. So I've even experienced that. It's probably because I went to a Christian school, but that's a whole nother story. Okay, we have the fourth question. Do you want to ask that, Cathy, since I've been asking a lot?
You do what you want to do. So, our lovely Danielle begins his journey pining after a girl, the lovely Kaval, and ends up discovering a lot about himself. What was important about Danielle's journey in your book that was very important for you to get across to your readers?
Daniel's actually a pretty complex character for someone who's considered pretty shallow by everyone around him. Yeah. And there are various aspects to his journey. I think the most important thing for me was, if you look for external happiness, and as young people, I feel like we do that more, and then as we get older, we kind of stop caring what people think, hopefully, you know, as much. And so, you know, yeah, exactly. So And also, by the way, people get more polite. Like they still talk about you, but then they do it behind your back. When you're younger, they just do it in your face. So if people are talking about you, you know about it less. But for Danielle, I wanted to show that, just because you want something, it doesn't mean like it's the best thing for you. Life will work out. Things will, just to sort of trust yourself, grow yourself, and then the world will become better around you. And so that was part of it. The other part of it was, he doesn't, so he's got two friends, Sohrab, who is very religious, and Intizar, who is very funny, but very irreverent and definitely not religious. And Danielle's kind of caught in the middle and is trying to figure out his relationship with, his religion, his culture. And what's cool about Danielle's story is he doesn't have to run away from anything to find out how he is. He's able to use his own frames of reference, make his own decisions, but still become his own person without becoming either one of his friends, or trying to copy anybody. So I had a lot of fun with Danielle. Danielle was a lot of fun to write. I had finished writing the adult book that I wrote, The Bad Muslim Discount, has two narrators, and one of them is a little darker, so in tone. So it took it was really refreshing to be able to write Danielle Jelani and his lovable antics.
He is so adorable. So adorable. I want to be like, come in, make me food. Talk to me. Tell me your problems. I want to know.
Yeah, I love him. He's great.
I think that's the next question actually about food. Yes. Great transition, Cathy. You're on it.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in More Than Just a Pretty Face, Danielle wants to be a chef and is very passionate about food and cooking. So we want to know, how important is cooking and food to you? And are you a foodie?
Yes, I am a foodie for sure. In fact, anyone who comes to the Bay Area and has read the book, there are some great restaurant recommendations from Danielle Jelani in the book. All those restaurants are real, except for there's one where he goes and he doesn't like the food. I would never do that to someone's business. So so that one's fake. But all the other ones where he loves the food, they're all real. Go check them out. They're all great. So they're based on obviously my going there and eating the food. So,
Research.
I love food.
It was research.
Yes, research, exactly. That should be tax deductible. Now that I think about it, I should have written that off on my taxes, right? Anyway,
yes.
Too late now. But seriously though, I have some dishes that I can make. With YouTube now, there's this one particular Desi uncle who does a really good tutorial on some of the foods. So I can make some food, but I'm not a chef. And so learning that process and what that, how that works, how kitchens work, that was really cool as well. But yeah, I love food. It's I'm right now I don't think I have them here, but I'm in the process of rediscovering vegetables. I've been resistant to them my entire life, but for the sake of my children, I will eat them now. So I've been reading these cookbooks by Ottolenghi, which he has some great cookbooks, and the food there is fantastic. I've been making some of that. So if anyone wants to pick those up and try them out, those are great.
Now, did you also make up the restaurant where he works at?
Yes, that is also fake. Yes, that is also fake. And in fact, I got so the book is also sold in France. And the one feedback I got from there was, yeah, this is all great. You did a good job, except don't use croissants to make sandwiches. A French person would never do that. And I'm like, oh, sorry.
Interesting.
But that was great. It was fantastic.
Do you want to go on to the next question, Cathy?
Oh yeah, I can read. Where are we? Oh, what did you enjoy the most about writing More Than Just a Pretty Face?
I got to do some cool stuff with the two friends. So Sohrab and Intizar, we talked about earlier, there's two buddies. And I've had an interesting sort of spiritual journey in my life. I think being an immigrant screws you up just a little bit. And so, I feel like people tend to close ranks when they're in a new place and sort of try to cling to something familiar. And then, so that was my high school years. And then I went to college and I became more like Intezar. So I've been like on the spectrum in my entire life between those two characters, it feels like. And so what I didn't have when I was growing up was actually, quite frankly, even now, very few male Muslim leads in YA still. And so there's, even now, but back then there weren't any, and so I didn't have books that told me that the world was I was less alone in the world than I felt sometimes. And so, I was able to write these two characters, these two friends. They have their own journeys, some more successful than others. But I was able to tell myself, my past self, some things, and then if other people on the same journey, they may find some help there. They may find at least the acknowledgement that other people have gone through it too, and you'll be okay, more or less. So yeah, that's right. It's okay. But yeah, I mean, for example, if when you move from a different country and you're still very concerned about the politics of that country, and you feel like you want to help and you want to change the world, I found that you can do small things effectively as opposed to constantly worrying about the big part, the big picture of the world. We tend to get very concerned these days about the big picture of the world, but in the civil rights movement, they used to say, bloom where you're planted. And I love that. And I think that that's one of the things that Danielle teaches in Sohrab. Yeah, you got all these big concerns, but you can do good in your own community, and that's where you start. And so I was really glad to be able to work that in.
Yeah, I really love the two friends and that juxtaposition between Danielle, who's just kind of in the middle of the road, and then you have the two on the other side. And then he has to think about, like, how do I get them together? How do we do this? How do I help one and help the other?
Right.
So it was just really nice to see that friendship and that trust, and him being able to help them in some way.
And that happens a lot. As you grow older, your childhood friends, like, they go in different directions, even if they were in the same group.
Yeah.
And it becomes a challenge sometimes to sort of keep everyone together. And if you're tasked with being the glue person, that can be tough.
Yeah, he's definitely the glue.
Yes.
Do you have any friends from high school that you still are in contact with, or?
Yes, indeed. My best friend, who was my best enemy back in high school, but in Pakistan, actually, before high school, we got into a big fight. Anyway, back in high school, and then we slowly became friends over the years. He's a cardiologist in Cincinnati now, and we are constantly in touch. And he's been a big cheerleader for the book, and he's reading the adult book right now, and he keeps sending me messages, and he's like, how is all this stuff go on in your head? Like, how do you come up with this stuff? And I'm like, all right. I'm very complex.
I'm excited to ask you more about that book towards the end, because we have a few more questions. But did you have something to say, Cathy? I kind of interrupted you.
No, just a little quip that Cathy interrupts people. Tell the cardiologist he gets one question a day or a week, whatever.
Well, what's really cool is, when someone who you've known your entire life starts reading your stuff, their reaction is very valuable. I will say, I have a cousin who apparently has been going around telling people that these books are based on my real life, and I really like him to stop these. I would really appreciate it if you stopped doing that, if you're watching.
Oh, man. I wonder how many writers get asked that. Like, oh, was this a person that you knew? Because I'm sure that has to happen. So when this, I don't get to name my team is wonderful, and they come up with better titles than I do. So none of the titles of my books have been picked by me. And so when More Than Just a Pretty Face was picked as a title, my wife told some people at the mosque, some of her friends, it's called More Than Just a Pretty Face, and it was like, so who's this girl? Is it about you? Like, who's this girl that he's writing about? And my wife was like, it's just a fictional character, and it's the boy who it's about. So, which is why I thought it was a great title, because everyone assumes that phrase is linked to a girl, but it's about Danielle. So yeah, thank you for my team for the wonderful titles. And the third book doesn't have a title yet because they haven't come up with it, so I'm waiting. And it's going to be a YA, right?
Yes, the next book is a YA. It is about a young man who's homeschooled by his 100-year-old great grandfather, who doesn't like
Oh my
technology. And so this kid has to basically come out of this bunker and go to high school. And in a way, what we've already talked about, some of my experiences where you don't know the slang, you don't, when you're an immigrant coming in, he's an immigrant in time, to borrow a phrase from Mohsen Hamid. So, he's coming in from one time period to another, basically. And yeah, it's a YA rom-com. I'm having fun with it. I'm still editing that one. So
that's so exciting. And going back to this one, the title's amazing and the cover.
Yes, the cover is wonderful.
Love the cover. It's so great. And I love what they're wearing, the font. It's just the whole thing. Just
they did a great job with the cover. I was really happy. Yeah.
I love it. I love covers. Okay, so this next question's putting the focus back on you. So you're an attorney, but you also studied English literature. Did you always want to be a writer? Did it just sort of happen, or was it the original plan, but then you had to make money?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to my parents, because when you're an immigrant kid, especially the oldest son in a Desi family, Pakistani Indian family, it's there's a lot of financial expectations on you, right? And so my parents were not on board with me being an English major. Like it was not cool, and that's a long story. But you see some of that in Danielle's journey as well. And so they, so I kind of stumbled into the law, is what I always tell people. But I always wanted to be a writer. I've been writing since I was in grade school. I didn't actually think I'd get published, because it just always seems like, oh my God, it's impossible. And it wasn't until later in life that I decided, it was something I wanted to do. But I've always written stories. I think you can be a writer, without even getting published. But being an author was an aspiration, but like one of those like secret ones. Like I won't even tell anyone. No one even knew I had written these books. My mom didn't know. No one, my family, aside from my wife, nobody knew until I had the book deals. And it wasn't even after I got the offers. It was after we signed the paperwork and everything was done. That's when I told people, because I wasn't sure it was real until it was done.
Oh. We don't have a Facebook question, but we have a comment from someone named Amberine.
Oh, yes, that is one of my cousins. Yeah.
He said, I'm not, she, right? Yes.
Yes.
I'm not the cousin blabbing.
Yes, no, she is not the cousin blabbing.
No.
I will not name the cousin who's blabbing.
Just wanted to acknowledge that comment.
Yes. Hi, Amberine. Eid Mubarak.
Okay, so I'll ask the next one if it works out. So from your experience now, we know that you've written 2, you're writing the 3rd. What is the number one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring author?
This is advice that I think gets it gets overused a lot, and I think misunderstood a lot. People always say, write what you know. And then people come back and say, oh, what if I want to write science fiction? And I haven't been to space. I don't know what that's like. Okay, well, write what you know. Write what you know. The real advice should be write the truth that you know. And so you can set it anywhere. It can be about anything. It can be in any genre. As long as you are writing honestly about real experiences, you will connect with readers and you will find readership. I mean, that's why we still read Shakespeare, because the themes and the humanity is still the same. It's just the way he speaks may be different, and the setting is different, obviously, but the core emotions, the truths are still there. So just write truthfully, and then sort of let the chips fall where they may after that.
I love that, because it reminds me so much. For one of the questions, I originally had like quotes from the book, and I'm like, no, I don't want to have quotes, because then what if people think I'm reading the story? But that reminds me so much of 2 quotes. One is when Danielle's talking about Churchill, and he says, I wish I would have kept it now because I could actually read it, and now I have to like just try to remember it. He was talking about being able to say your truth, but not knowing like what that meant. And then later on, his father talks about how in life you have to compromise, and sometimes you can't say your truth and you can't live your fantasies. And that just reminded me of that. And I was gonna ask, but I don't know if I want to ask, but now I'm gonna ask because I brought it up and now I have to follow through. So the relationship between Danielle and his father.
Yes.
It's kind of like Rocky, and then I'm not gonna say what happens at the end because I don't want to ruin anything, but did you ever have those kind of interactions with your dad, I guess, for like the expectations and kind of like the pressure?
The family relationships are complicated, right? I mean, what happens with children, I think, is we don't realize our parents are mortal until they're gone, really. And so there's this, my father passed away about 10 years ago. And so there's this, until they're gone, you don't think they're ever going to be gone. I think that's kind of really unfortunate because you don't have a time limit in mind on your relationship. You think it's going to continue forever. And the other thing is, as you grow, as a teenager, at least I personally was, I thought I was smarter than I was. And so, because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know the depth of knowledge and subjects you're aware of, and you don't know the width of human experience. So your parents do have a better idea. And then when they try to tell you, you're like, oh, you guys don't know anything. And then as you get older, you talk to your parents more. And especially after, I became an attorney, we used to take, so I graduated right at the time of the financial crash, in 2008, I think I finished school. And so everything was still recovering. And so we had to go on these long drives to go for job interviews. And so I got to know him then, really. But then he passed away like a couple of years later. Most of my life, though, my conversations with my dad were about sports, and they were about sports. And I will say, by the way, one of the things that he did, which was incredible, which with my kids I'm having difficulty doing, is he would never speak to me in Urdu because he wanted me to learn how to speak in English when we were living in Pakistan. So for my entire life, this man would, like, if I asked him something in Urdu, he would make me repeat myself in English. And then we moved here, it flipped. So, because he wanted me to keep the language. And now that I have children of my own, I'm realizing how hard that is. That is really difficult because your instinct is just to respond and just to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Let me make this kid. And it's annoying as a kid. And I really appreciate it now. So yes, there are some parallels, but I think generally over time, your relationship with your parents will change.
Okay. Do you want me to keep going, Cathy?
That's good. So on your website, you list other interests as good food, video games, sitcoms, and books of all kinds. So what are you currently reading and what are you currently watching?
Well, for people who don't have kids, if you have kids, one of the things no one ever tells you is that your TV viewing experience will change dramatically. So right now I'm watching a lot of Paw Patrol, My Pony, Team Umizoomi. There's a big part of my life right now. My friends keep saying you should watch this, you should watch that, and I'm like, I will put it on my ever growing and never reducing list because a lot of stuff, especially these days, has a lot of language in it. And when we used to watch it around my kids, when my oldest kid was around 3 years old, he said the F word one time. And I'm like, okay, HBO's gone. There's no HBO. So, it's really unfortunate because we were watching a lot of Veep at that time. And it's a great show and I love it. I'm really behind because we can't watch it around the kids. And then with writing, I can't, there's not enough time. And then as far as reading is concerned, I've recently started working seriously on the edits for my next book. So what happens is I will read a lot of YA leading up to when I'm either drafting or editing, because I need to know what's happening in the industry and I want to be familiar with what people are doing. And it's a lot of fun because they're great authors. But then when I'm in it, I can't have their voice affecting my voice, if that makes any sense. So I have to sort of step back. So I start reading more nonfiction. I'll read sci-fi. I'm reading There's a beautiful copy of Dune that's out there now, floating out there, I'm sure.
Oh my
But there's a movie
gosh, and the
coming out.
blue on the side. Yeah.
The blue on the sides, I love that. And so,
Yeah.
so there's a movie coming out, obviously. So I want to read that again because I read it like 20 years ago. So I'm going to start on that. I'm reading Rumi's The Masnavi in translation. So I'll read poetry. I'll read nonfiction stuff, but I slow down my reading because what happens is you'll start to absorb the voice of the other characters, especially if it's a good book, you know, and you can't do that. So I work really hard for my voice. It's very fragile, and sometimes it gets to the point where I won't even answer emails. Like I can't write anything except my character in his voice, because if I don't, and some characters are more cooperative than others. With, you know, they're more willing to tell their stories. Danielle was almost effortless. It's not a problem, but one of my narrators in my adult book, it was like, you know, okay, work with me here, give me something. And so with those voices that are more difficult to coax out, I'll stop responding to emails and where to go. But you know, I will respond to emergencies, but you know, if it's other stuff, it can wait. So TV has gone down, and the reading is a little slow right now.
I love it. I feel like if you were an actor, you would be a method actor. Like you would just be on set in character when it's not your scene, because you have to stay in character.
Don't those people really annoy everyone they work with though? I imagine that would be really annoying if you're one of the other actors, right? But I heard Leonard Nimoy used to do that, and he was one of my favorite actors. I'm a big Star Trek fan, and so when he was playing Spock, I read somewhere, I heard on an interview that he would really try to stay in character the entire time he was on set. So
Makes sense.
I love it. So going back to Dune really quick, I don't know, have you watched the old like miniseries?
I have watched the miniseries, yeah, and so that's why one of the reasons I can appreciate the beauty of the side cover, because the spice color is the same in the movie, or the miniseries, sorry. So yeah, that was great. I watched that in college. So yeah, I watched it in college. I had like an old beat up TV set, and I got it on videotape from Blockbuster or whatever. Those were the days when they had Blockbusters. So now we have, you know, what's happening to me recently is I have Terminator Dark Fate. I got it for 99 cents for the rental, and it's about to expire. I haven't been able to get away from my kids long enough to watch the movie, but it's very violent. So today's the last day. I won't be able to see it. So,
Oh,
yeah, it is what it is.
Let's see. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the viewers about More Than Just a Pretty Face before we kind of ask you a few more questions about your book coming out in November?
Sure. I mean, you know, what I'm going to say, and I've sort of touched on this before, is, yeah, when you actually, the back cover is cool too. I would like to thank all these authors. These guys are great, and I really appreciate them taking the time to read and blurb. But one of the things that I'd like to say is, some of the feedback I'm getting is a little intimidating in the sense that people are like, "Oh, I didn't know this is what Muslims are like." I'm like, no. This is not what all Muslims are like at all. You know, this is one family, or one. It's a very Northern California centric book. There's a lot of San Francisco in the book, and I love San Francisco. I was privileged to work there, so there's a lot of the city in the book. But it's a very small subset and a very small part of the experience of 2 billion people. So please don't come to a YA rom-com about teenagers in California and then walk away thinking that it's taught you something about the village. It's taught you about how those people in that circumstance live. I feel like it's very honest about that, but it's not meant to be ideological or, you know, just read widely. And if you read widely, you will get exposure to a lot of the wonderful authors you talked about before. And, you know, there are Muslims in China, there are Muslims in, you know, obviously India and the former Soviet Union countries. And there's like a lot of, in Europe, obviously. So everyone has different experiences, and you're reading about a very, very small subsection of them. So I hope you enjoy it. That's my main goal, to entertain you. But yeah, don't like, yeah, I personally just get worried that people are gonna think, oh, this is what it's like everywhere. And it's like, no.
It's just California.
I was once in Pakistan. I was in Karachi once. It was a mock exam that we were doing, and this guy walked in late, right? And there was one seat beside me, which was empty, and then the seat next to me there was a girl sitting there, and so he comes and stands next to me on my left, looking around for an empty seat, and there are no more empty seats. I'm like, dude, just sit over here. There's a seat right here. And he leans over and he whispers, but she's sitting there. I can't stay next to a girl. And I'm like, okay. So I pick up my stuff and I switch over. But there are people who experience religion very differently than how I experience it. And the way I experience it is different from the way my characters do. So always take that with a grain of salt. And the more writers you read from different backgrounds, the better sense you'll get of how complex the world is.
And right now there's an Own Voices blogger Instagram campaign going on for the book.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I read that. Okay. Do you read those, or do you, because I know a lot of authors have said, don't look at Goodreads.
Yeah, I try to stay off of Goodreads. Ever since I saw someone give Oscar Wilde 1 star for something, I'm like, all right, I'm done. I'm done with Goodreads. But no, seriously though, what happens with Instagram and Twitter, people will tag you, and I appreciate people reading and everything, but especially when you're editing, your mental space is pretty fragile. And so you don't want outside influences necessarily coming in. But I do see the feedback. And what's interesting is you don't, as an author, necessarily always get feedback into how the book is marketed, right? And sometimes you're more sensitive to how different places will react to the book than necessarily the marketing team is. But I've actually really enjoyed the book tour in the sense that there are some people who loved it and there are some people who've hated it. I'm kind of like, that's cool, right? I mean, that's absolutely fine, because it goes back to what I was saying before. I make no claims of it being, Muslim representation. A lot of the people who've not liked it have not liked it because they feel like it doesn't represent Islam as a religion. And my response to that is, I never said I was trying to do that. I definitely was not trying to do that. In fact, I'm saying today, I definitely was not trying to do that. I was trying to tell the truth about a very limited experience of Muslims. And so there are Muslims everywhere, and their stories are going to be different. And I have a lot of respect for that. So if people come to your book expecting what you were never trying to do, and they don't like it for that reason, I'm okay with that, because I was never trying to do it. So you came to it with your own expectations, right? And so the people who have really enjoyed it, I try to pay more attention to that. I try to be generally a positive person. And for everyone who didn't, especially for people who didn't like it, who want to be authors, let me tell you, I will be your biggest cheerleader if you try and get published. I mean, you really should, because your stories are important too. And if they're different from the stories I'm telling, then you should be published and you should also write. And I hope to read your work.
Aww. That was a good end to that question. Okay, so now we want to know a little bit more about your book coming out in November, The Bad Muslim Discount. So you told me, I think before we went live, that you wrote that before you wrote More Than Just a Pretty Face, but this one's getting published before.
It was acquired first. So
okay.
So that book, the Bad Muslim Discount, again, I didn't come up with a title for anyone who's offended by it. I think it's a great title. It's
and a great cover. I wish I had. Yeah,
the cover is great too. We had a great artist do the cover, and the title is about this Desi Pakistani uncle who owns this apartment building in San Francisco, and he gives out discounts for different types of Muslims. So he'll have a good Muslim discount, he has a bad Muslim discount. He judges you and then gives you money off your rent for his judgment. So that's where the title comes from. So I wrote that first. It's obviously a comedy, as you can tell. But that book was a big undertaking. I mean, the manuscript for it was like 550 pages when it was done. And My editor sent it back to me in the mail, and it was like this thin. I was like, oh my God, this guy's a magician. He cut it down by half. And then I realized he just printed it double-sided. So,
So sneaky.
but that's a bigger book. I think in print is going to be around 380 pages. It's a very different book. So I wrote that first, and while that was on submission, I wrote more than just a pretty face in the course of so that took years to write, and I wrote more than just a pretty face in 4 or 5 months, 6 months, something like that. So it was a very different experience because it's not when you're writing a rom-com, it's not as dense, and when you're writing for younger adults, it's actually really challenging, but it's a different kind of challenge. There's a lot more freedom in when you're writing for adults in the kind of references you can use, right? So if you want to throw in like a bunch of biblical references or stuff, I don't care if my adult readers get it or not. They can go look it up. I do care if my younger audience gets it or not, And so I will make it easier for them. I will expect less work from them. So it limits your freedom of references, but there's a lot more freedom to just sort of have your themes, and it's the literature of hope, because I feel like youth is a time of hope. And I feel like adult books are more about discontent, or how do I get here in my life and how do I get out, kind of thing. So it's hope versus discontent. So I like the themes of one, I like the freedom of the other. So I like to go back and forth between the two, and I think it's a lot of fun.
And which one did you like writing more, the adult or the YA? I want to know.
They were so different. I mean, they were honestly it's hard for me to say because they're so different. The editorial process is the same, and publishing houses have small variations on how they do things, but More Than Just a Pretty Face was more organic for me. Like, it came more naturally once I was past the first 50 pages. The other one I had to sort of write and then rewrite and then rewrite, and so it went through a lot more. So it took more out of me. Also, I didn't know what I was doing as much, because that was my first book that I was writing. It was a novel, which, by the way, just got a starred review from the Library Journal. So that was pretty cool. So that was yesterday. But I didn't know as much, and so I had to learn and work for a lot more. Pretty Face was easier because I was more confident. I knew more what I was doing. And I also trusted my process more because, again, going back to our earlier conversation, if you're going to go without a plot and you're just going to stumble through it, with the first book, it's hard to have faith that it's going somewhere. The second book is a little easier to have faith. It's like, okay, I know I can do this. I've done it before. This will work. So it was easier. I can't say it was more enjoyable because I had more freedom as far as I took the Bible in literature class in undergrad, and I really enjoyed it. I was a TA for it, so I had like a bunch of biblical references, and there's a point when they're leaving their city, and I talk about Lot's wife, when she turns back and looks, and that kind of stuff. Like, if you do that in a YA, you have to really explain it to your audience, I feel like, because it's not fair to expect a younger audience to just know that. Like, they won't know that, and it's not their fault. I mean, I don't know a lot of the stuff that they know. One of the things that happened, for example, with More Than Just a Pretty Face is when I wrote this, I thought, because of who Danielle is, I thought it'd be really cool to reference the song "You're So Fancy" or "I'm So Fancy," And my editor was like, "Do you know how old that song is?" And she's like, "You can't put that in there." I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" So it's current references are important, and that's the challenge of YA is you can't always reference everything you want to.
No, that's true. And references are always changing. I remember talking to one of our adult romance authors we had a while ago, Kristen Rockaway. She talks about different apps. And one of the apps she talked about ended up, like, in one of her first drafts, it ended up like being unpopular, so it basically like went away. So she had to come up with a whole new one. So I can imagine all the work that goes into trying to make everything current when things are constantly changing.
Well, what happens, especially I think these days with authors, unfortunately because of Corona, is if you do what I did and you reference a lot of businesses and restaurants, and then one of them closes, and then it's like, oh, do I go back and change it? So that kind of thing. So I've heard of authors having that problem, which is they've made references to things or places that no longer exist, and then it's like, do I change it? Do I leave it? So yeah, those are always challenges, and everyone deals with it in their own way, unfortunately.
So have you been writing during this pandemic, or have you just been editing? Like, have you had to be creative during this?
No, I've been editing for the most part.
Horrible time.
Yeah, my problem is because of the way I write, the first draft is just terrible. And it never actually goes out, typically speaking. But because I was under contract, it did go out, and I was like, oh, my editor is going to think I don't know what I'm doing at all, because it's terrible. But the second draft, which I did during the pandemic, was all right. And then now I'm working on it again, and it's actually kind of nice. I know it's challenging because your emotions are kind of all over the place a little bit. But it's also an escape. Like, you can step into someone else's shoes, and the pandemic is not happening. So you're writing about someone's experience where it's not the case, and they're living their regular life. So that's kind of nice. We will too one day again, I'm hoping.
I'm over COVID.
Yeah.
Isn't everybody?
Yeah.
So What's Just a Pretty Face comes out the 4th. The Bad Muslim Discount is November. Do we have a date? Is it just November 17th? Do you have a date for number 3, or is that still?
It will be in September of 2021.
My birthday.
Okay. There you go.
September's a good month.
Yeah.
We're excited about this. Okay, before our closing question, I have one last question. It's the question that I always ask during these, and it's my favorite question. What is your favorite library memory?
It's actually pretty embarrassing.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. So as people may have figured out from my answers so far as how I plot and I write, I sort of live the way I plot, which is I just do what I'm doing. And I trust things are going to work out. I've gotten on airplanes not knowing where my stopover was. I'm just like, I'm sort of just floating through our world, and thankfully my wife is more organized than that. And I've had to get better because of my career, my day job. But we first moved to Toronto, to Pickering, and I wanted to go to the library, and my dad had taken the car, so I was taking public transportation in a different country for the first time. And there are the library itself, I believe, is on Rouge Hill. There is another bus stop called Rogue River, and I figure Rouge, Rogue, it's pretty much the same thing. And so it is not. So I left the house. I got on the Rogue bus instead of the Rouge bus. And 4 hours later, I was still looking for the library. I found a lake, but I didn't find the library. I finally made it to the library. I went and I came back home. I had been gone for like 7 hours. My mom was freaking out. We didn't have cell phones at that time. But it was just the Rogue Rouge thing. But then again, I also almost ended up trying to fly to Oakland. I almost ended up in Oklahoma once because I figured Oklahoma, Oakland, kind of same thing. It's I've gotten better at these things. It's just I've always been like, my mind's always, I'm always very distracted. I used to be less, I'm less now, but when I was younger, I used to be very distracted. I was always thinking about other things. So, if I got a story going in my head, I remember I was on a bus once and I was holding the transfer stub, and I was thinking about something, and the guy comes, some guy walks by and just snatches the stub from my hand and walks away. And I'm like, he took my stub. And I go back to thinking what I was thinking about, and I'm like, hey, wait a second, he took my stub. I will admit to being disorganized, and that's my favorite library memory because I learned something from that, which is Rouge and Rogue are different words and they are different places. So yeah, pay attention to where you're going.
I love it. I feel like at the end of every single answer to these questions, there's like a tagline.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay, so now we have our little closing question. I don't know. Do you want to say it, Cathy?
Oh,
or do you
sure.
want me to say it?
Let's get crazy. So, where can readers find you, and where can they get your books?
Well, I have an Instagram account that I don't use a lot. I'm not very good at it, so don't find me there. But I'm on Twitter. You can find me there. My website, I believe, is syed-masood.com. So I am there. And then for Pretty Face, it'll be hopefully everywhere. All major retailers, libraries, and of course, I think Walmart, Target, usual, and then online. Little Brown Young Readers has a page for it with all kinds of links that you can buy it from. So
Cool.
Yes, and for anyone watching now or later after this is recorded, in the description of the video is where you can pre-order the book, the website, and all the social media tags, including Instagram, even though.
well, I mean, I have gotten better at it because I've been told that I'm going to be doing like my launch event on there. And I'm like, I have 39 total posts. You expect me to host an event on this platform? I don't know anything about it.
Where's the button?
I've been trying to figure it out. I apologize to everyone who privately messaged me on Instagram. I did not realize that was a feature that was available for the longest time. So when I was late not because I was ignoring you, but because I did not see the little red alert button thing. So.
And they keep moving buttons.
If you say so, I'm not.
It's up here.
It's just I prefer the platforms I can use on my computer more. Instagram feels like it's more mobile, and I prefer words to images. So it's kind of not my thing. But some people have done. By the way, anyone who's done pictures and put stuff on Instagram for Pretty Face, actually amazing. The amount of the really cool pictures and stuff people have taken of the book, and I've really been enjoying those.
Yeah, there's a really pretty one that I think is from the Own Voices tour. Oh no, I just looked it up earlier. I love it how people like pose the book with like flowers and other books.
It gets so fancy.
Darn.
I know, I can't take good pictures for the life of me. I'm not even allowed to take pictures in my family.
I hope they tagged you. Oh, here we go. This is the one I'm talking to. Oh,
yeah,
that one.
Well, that's very pretty.
Oh, that is nice.
Very
right?
cool.
I'm so impressed. And then there's like that one.
Very nice. Yeah. There's actually someone also, someone, I don't know who, I suspect my editors or my publishers responsible for this, but someone actually did those Instagram type posts on Amazon too. And so like, there's like, I've never seen that before. I was like, that's really cool. So
That's
yeah.
really cool.
But yeah, they've done some amazing things that I really appreciate, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, they're just great. I try to take those kind of photos, but it does not.
It does not work out for me.
Does not look like that. Yeah.
Now I feel like I'm being challenged. Bring the book
I think
back.
it's always the lighting, right? Okay. This is an official challenge, Cathy. I'm going to bring this back, and we're going to do our own fancy photo.
Yes, and in preparation for this, every week I do a teen book talk, and I read and review 2 different books, and then after the week is over, then I give away a copy of each of those books. So what's today, Saturday? Oh, so Monday I did a book talk with your book and another book. I can't remember the name of the other one. Anyway, so next week someone will get a copy of your book.
Very cool.
I
hope they enjoy it.
Yeah, I hope so too. They should, because I reviewed it so well.
We only review the finest books.
Exactly. Really, yeah, only the finest.
Okay, it looks like we did pretty good. We went a little bit over, but that's okay because we had some great questions. So thank you again for joining us and answering the questions and sharing your story. Just really appreciate it. And Cathy's just going to let people know where they can order the book and a little bit about our summer virtual activity challenge.
So as we mentioned before, you can get the book when it comes out next week, or you can pre-order it now, many different places, but you can also pre-order it from the Ripped Bodice bookstore at therippedbodicela.com. And you still have time to sign up for our summer virtual activity challenge, which ends August 16th. So this is our week 5. So we have 2 more weeks left. All you have to, So all you have to do is go to our website, sign up, participate in the challenges, win prizes. And we also have a page with our free digital resources. So you can find out what you can do from home. And you can always check our calendar and our social media platforms to see, what's happening, future author talks with fabulous people. Yeah.
Thank you, Cathy.
You're welcome.
Yep. So we hope to see you again here Friday, August 14th, here on Facebook for our next live virtual author chat featuring authors Alexa Martin and Talia Hibbert. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a good one.